next topic in embryology in continuation is fertilization. Fertilization is nothing but fusion of male gamete, that is spermatozoa, and female gamete, that is oocyte. So fusion of these spermatozoa and oocyte to form a zygote. These are haploid cells. Fusion of these haploid cells to form a diploid cell called as zygote is called as fertilization. How this fertilization is occurring, you can see over here in this video. If you observe in this video, which shows the female genital tract over here, in which it's focusing right now towards the ovary. Now we are focusing towards the ovary. So this is the ovary, which shows many follicles in the periphery of the ovary at different stages. As we discussed in the previous video, there is follicular development from primordial follicle to primary follicle to a growing and mature follicle, which ruptures to release the oocyte from the ovary. This release of oocyte from ovary is called as ovulation, which usually occurs immediately after the metaphase arrest in the meiosis 2, which can only happen for next 24 hours, within which it has to be fertilized, the secondary oocyte. That's what we discussed in the last class. So if you see how ovulation is occurring, the mature follicle, it's now focusing on mature follicle, the parts of mature follicle, the mature follicle otherwise called as Graafian follicle, in which there is a secondary oocyte which is peripherally pushed with due to a mass called as cumulus oophorus, and with this is surrounded by granulosa cell layer or follicular cell layer and theca interna and theca externa. These are the various cells present in a Graafian follicle. How ovulation is occurring? So a mature Graafian follicle now ruptures to release ovum or ova along with that cumulus oophorus fluid. Yeah, that is ovulated oocyte. After the formation of ovulation oocyte, the remaining, as we shown here, yeah, after ovulation, the Graafian follicle is converted into yellow colored tissue called as corpus luteum, which produces the progesterone for maintaining pregnancy until the placenta is formed. So what happens after the release of this ovum or ova? This ova right now travels through this fallopian tube towards the ampullary region in the uterine tube. When it enters the ampulla and wait for the spermatozoa to come near the ampulla, to come to the ampulla for fertilization, which means ampulla is the site of fertilization. It's very important entrance question to what is the site of fertilization. It is the ampulla part of the fallopian tube. Now if you see this ova which is released, the parts of this ova has a female pronucleus at the center. Yes, if you see over here, the first polar body is at the periphery and the female pronucleus, which is arrested at second meiotic metaphase, is inside this oocyte is surrounded by zona pellucida, a membrane called as zona pellucida, as you see in this picture. And outside zona pellucida there is of corona radiata, there are cumulus cells of corona radiata. These are the cumulus cells which are radially arranged, called as corona radiata, outside the zona pellucida membrane. So inside zona pellucida membrane we have granulosa layer also. We'll see how it's happening, what's happening next. So here, this is how the sperms are competing in the female genital tract. They entering after the entry into the female genital tract, they are on their way towards the ampullary region for fertilization. So on its way, this is a sperm and these are the parts of mature sperm. Is mature sperm, as I told, in the spermatogenesis, the spermatids are converted to spermatozoa or the mature sperms by nourishment from the Sertoli cells. So this mature sperm has different parts, like the head, which has a main nucleus which is covered by acrosomal cap, and the middle part is called as middle piece or neck part, and the tail part are the principal piece. Now these sperm towards the ova, yeah, among these sperms one sperm starts reaching here. So if you see the different layers on the ova which is released after ovulation, you can see the oocyte cell membrane, and there is a perivitellin space between the zona pellucida and the oocyte cell membrane, and inside zona pellucida there is cortical granules. Inside zona pellucida there is cortical granules, and outside zona pellucida there is corona radiata, which is a radial arrangement of cumulus cells. So if you see over here what's happening, the sperms are reaching the ova. So when sperms reach ova, three reactions occur which prevent polyspermy. Among them, the major of them is called a zona reaction, that is change in the permeability of the zona pellucida, so that it will not enter other sperms. How it's occurring? It's occurring immediately after fertilization. It's occurring immediately after the fertilization of the ova with one sperm. How it's occurring? First, the entry of the attachment, first the attachment of the first sperm to the zona pellucida occurs. After sperm binding to the zona pellucida, the acrosomal cap, which is the head end cap of zona pellucida, has some acrosomal enzymes called as acrosin. They are called as acrosin and acid phosphatase hyaluronidase, as you can see over here. So what's happening? Polyspermy is prevented by how? The polyspermy is prevented. Polyspermy is prevented by zona reaction. What is zona reaction? Zona reaction is nothing but changing the permeability of zona pellucida membrane to avoid the second sperm to bind. How it's occurring? Immediately when the sperm binds to zona pellucida, as yeah. So immediately when the sperm binds to the zona pellucida, what's happening? Sperm binding to zona pellucida. This binding of sperm to the zona pellucida membrane, sperm to the zona pellucida, is the trigger to release the acrosomal enzymes from the acrosomal cap. So what's happening? You can see these enzymes are like acrosin, acid phosphatase hyaluronidase. These enzymes help the sperm to penetrate the zona pellucida. So how it's occurring? You can see. Yeah. Thus, acrosomal reaction occurs. This reaction is called as acrosome. That is, release of acrosomal enzymes are called as acrosomal reaction. Due to acrosomal reaction, what happens? Sperm penetrates to the zona pellucida. Now, sperm is penetrating into the zona pellucida. Zona pellucida. It penetrated the zona pellucida, and what happens next? It is entering into the cell membrane of ova. Yeah, it is entering into the cell membrane of ova, binding of sperm and oocyte cell membrane, sperm to the oocyte cell membrane. Now this now results in, after this entry of sperm, what happens? Only the head and neck piece will enter. The tail piece will break off outside. Only the head and tail neck piece will enter. Immediately after this, what is happening? You can see the outer shell is around the pronucleus is lost, and release of male pronucleus occurs. Yeah. Now immediately after this, what happens is other sperm starts to enter here. When other sperms try to enter this ova, there is release of this cortical granules from the cortical layer. Yeah, from the cortical layer where there are cortical granules, there will be release of cortical granules, release the cortical enzymes. You can say release of cortical granules or cortical enzymes. This cortical enzymes release is called as cortical reaction, which is second reaction in the sequence. Immediately after the cortical reactions, what happens? This cortical enzymes reach the zona pellucida, and this results in block polyspermy. How? By changing the permeability of zona pellucida towards sperm. So these cortical enzymes reach zona pellucida and changes the permeability of the zona pellucida towards sperm. This is called a zona reaction. So acrosomal reaction, cortical reaction, and zona reaction occur in a sequence. So these three reactions occur in sequence. These three reactions occur in sequence during fertilization. Very important. This sequence is also asked as an entrance question once. Next what's happening? So this is what happening, and finally immediately after the fertilization, that is fusion of male and female gametes, what's happening? The metaphase of incomplete second meiotic division, now it is resumed, because within 24 hours sperm bound to it. If at all this is not happening, that metaphase arrest oocyte will degenerate, but fertilization occurred. Therefore, this fertilization is a trigger for resuming metaphase arrest. So metaphase arrest of the second meiotic division will be resumed, and thus the division is completed. The second meiotic division is thus completed, resulting in one polar body formation, which is pushed outside, and the remaining haploid nucleus content is called as female pronucleus, and already male pronucleus is inside. This female pronucleus and male pronucleus, their fusion occurs, resulting in the formation of a diploid cell. This cell is right now called as zygote. This cell right now is called as zygote. This zygote formation is otherwise called as fertilization. Yeah, this is details of fertilization. So this is the formation of zygote. This is called as fertilization. If you want to revise once, what's fertilization? Fertilization is fusion of male and female gametes. So that where it's happening, it's occurring at ampulla junction. Very important. This is an MCQ. It's occurring at ampulla. First question. Next, polyspermy is prevented by what? By Zona reaction. What is Zona reaction? That is, Zona reaction is nothing but, what is Zona reaction? Zona reaction is nothing but change in the permeability of Zona pellucida. How it's occurring? It's occurring in the sequence of 3 events. First one is when sperm binds to Zona pellucida, this will become the trigger to release acrosomal enzymes from the acrosomal cap, like acrosine acid phosphatase hyaluronidase, results in sperm penetrating into Zona pellucida. Next, after penetrating into the Zona pellucida, this sperm will fuse with the cell membrane and immediately enters the head piece, and the neck piece will enters into the cell, and the tail piece will be released outside the ova itself, and this is converted to male pronucleus. During this fusion, what happens? The cortical layer inside, which has cortical granules, they release their enzymes called as cortical enzymes. This is called as cortical reactions. These cortical enzymes reach the Zona pellucida and are responsible for changing the permeability of the Zona pellucida towards the sperms, and thus the second sperm onwards, no sperm will enter into this ova, cannot enter this ova. This is how the polyspermy is prevented during fertilization. This is very important concept. After this Zona reaction, what's happening? The female oocyte has the metaphase arrest nucleus, which is resumed and releases second polar body, and the female pronucleus, the female and female pronucleus are fused to form the zygote, and the second polar body is pushed outside. That's the formation of zygote, and the formation of zygote is called as fertilization.